This episode of Lex Out Loud is brought to you by the patrons of Starwalker Studios. Learn how you can support the show at starwalkerstudios.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Lex Out Loud, world building for science fiction. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. I'm working on my third novel, my first science fiction novel, and I'm taking you along with me for the ride. This is the finale episode for season 1. Finally decided to call it today. And I thought that the perfect way to wrap up our first season on world building would be to answer the rest of your questions that I didn't get to before that you submitted about the setting. So today I'm going to talk a bit about the state of the Earth in the setting, jobs in space, and how education will be different in the future. So our first question today comes from Jake Ladd in our Discord server, who says, "What is the state of the Earth? Geologic state, like climate change, natural disasters, etc., as well as current political state, changes in borders, new and old nations, things like that." So those are great questions, Jake Ladd. Thank you for submitting them. And these are probably things I should give more thought to, or they're definitely things that I need to give more thought to be completely honest about it. And I've thought about this quite a bit since Jake Ladd submitted these questions a while ago. You know, I'm part of it wondering, are these questions I need to answer right now or not? Because, I mean, they're big questions. It's a lot to think about. So I thought about it, and I think that that this is one of those things that for now, I'm not going to concern myself too much with it other than the thoughts I've already had. And then if I come to a point as I'm writing the story where I realize I need more information, I need to know more, I need to flesh that out more, if it's needed, then I can flesh it out at that point. The other possibility is once I've finished the first draft of the first book, and at that point, once I've decided on any themes that I want to bring out or anything like that in the story, at that point, that would be a good time to decide if there's something I want to do with this. So that's one of the reasons I don't want to necessarily decide all this now, since what I'm doing right now, I don't need this information necessarily. I'd rather kind of leave it open because, you know, right now I don't really know what the themes of the book are going to be. I have some ideas, but that's the kind of thing you don't really know until you finish that first draft or even the second or third draft. And then you look at the thing you've created and, you know, you look for any themes that are already there that you can bring out more, things like that. You know, you kind of discover those kinds of things as you write it, and you may not in the beginning know what it's going to be when it's done. So things like that I don't need to decide right now. I'd rather kind of leave it open just in case, you know, I do come up with a theme or something for the story where then I might want something very specific to happen. And, you know, that's the time to decide these kinds of things. Or like I said, if it does become relevant sooner in the story, that all of a sudden I need to know something like how have the borders changed, or what is the state of Earth right now, then I can deal with it then. But as for right now, what I'm doing right now, I don't need that. So I've decided to kind of hold off on fleshing that out more than I already have, just in case something comes along that makes me think, oh, I should do this a certain way now, if that makes sense. So that said, my thoughts right now, what I'm thinking right now, and this is all subject to change, but what I'm thinking right now is that things here on Earth did get quite a bit worse from what they are now as far as climate change and all the impacts of that. Before, you know, people took it seriously enough and enough was done to slow the climate change down and then eventually to start to actually turn things around. So yeah, there were increasing numbers of natural disasters, more pandemics, things like that in the time that's passed, which is about 200 years. I think at this point in the history, about 200 years in the future, we finally stopped contributing to climate change. It's no longer getting worse, at least not from human actions, and have started to reverse what impacts we can. I'm sure that getting so many people and so much industry off of Earth and into space has helped with that a lot, as well as having most of the electricity on Earth now delivered via space solar power satellites. So, you don't have all the ways that we make electricity now, many of which involve burning fossil fuels. Those aren't happening anymore because the vast majority of the electricity is coming from space solar power, which is completely green as far as Earth is concerned. Also, there won't be internal combustion engines powering cars and trains and planes and things like that. Those kinds of vehicles won't be burning fossil fuels anymore. They'll all be electric. Pretty much everything's going to be electric by then. When you have practically unlimited electricity that's super cheap, suddenly it makes sense to make everything electric that you can anyway. There's going to be much more reliance on other forms of renewable energy like wind power, hydroelectric power, stuff like that. Also, at least in the developed nations, meat consumption will be much reduced compared to what it is now, if it's not completely eliminated, which it may be at that point. And the meat industry, if it's not completely gone, will be greatly diminished and will no longer be permitted to destroy the environment and have the impacts that it does now. They will be forced to behave more sustainably. So I guess basically what I'm saying is a lot of the things that you look around the world today and you're like, why in the hell are things being done this way? Why aren't they being done this other much more intelligent, obvious way? Those things will have happened, a lot of them by now, thankfully. Now, that said, it is not going to be a utopia. I'm not writing a utopian sci-fi. There's still going to be bad things in the world. Life isn't going to be perfect. There's still going to be ignorance, superstition, greed, prejudice, all those human failings, unfortunately, will still exist. But I think we will have learned a lot by then. And I think that by then, again, it's not a utopia, but it is a hopeful future. And in my future, 200 years from now, the governments of the world will be significantly less corrupt than they are now. And I am including very much so the United States in this. Our government is ridiculously corrupt right now. So I'm being hopeful and saying that the U.S. still exists 200 years in the future, which I think at this point is a pretty hopeful thing to believe or hope. And that, yes, it is far less corrupt. And there's been a bit of a reformation of the governments in many of the countries, including the U.S. by this point, because at some point people have just finally had enough of the corruption and greed and death. I think as much better as things will be on Earth in the future, I think things are going to be even better in space. That's going to be where it's at for the good life. Better run communities that become more and more self-sufficient. Better, more modern laws, true equality, things like that. Earth in general will be a bit more backwards than on the cylinders as far as how people live and think and whatnot. And there will be places on Earth still that are very backwards compared to what's going on in space. Places where it won't really be much different than it is today. For the most part, I think the nations will be what we're used to today. Right now, I don't have any plans of eliminating any major nations or adding any new nations or anything like that. I am thinking that there will have been some major changes in China and Russia, specifically in how their governments work. Again, I'm trying to make a hopeful future here, and they will be much more cooperative with the other spacefaring nations. So China and Russia are part of my setting part of this cylinder. They are one of the allied nations at this point, or two of, I guess I should say. Once space solar power is available to everyone, there's just going to be a lot less incentive to fight over resources because everyone's going to have everything they need. So what is there to fight over anymore other than ideological things, which I'm a cultural materialist, so I believe that all of those ideological things that people claim to fight over are really based in material things. So once that material inequality goes away, people will be a lot less willing to kill and die for their ideological differences. That's my prediction anyway. Also, information is going to continue to be more freely available. The internet isn't going to go away. People having video and audio recording capability on their persons at all time isn't going to go away. It's going to become even more ubiquitous and even more powerful, which means that as we're already seeing, the evil actions of people will continue to become more and more public. And it's going to continue to get harder and harder for people, governments, corporations, etc., to get away with atrocities because they're going to be caught in the act all the time. And everybody's going to know about it. And it's going to be harder and harder to bullshit people as time goes on. Like I said, this is all stuff I need to think about more probably. Part of it really is just deciding how political I want to get in these books. Right now, I want to, I'm thinking I want to be as little political as I can. That wasn't a good way to say that, but it's the best I could come up with on the spot. Politics is not my forte. In fact, until very recent years, I didn't pay any attention to it at all. It's not my forte. I'm not an expert in it. I don't immerse myself in it. So I have no doubt that there are writers out there who are much better qualified to do more political things than I am. I try to stick with what I'm good at. So I don't think the books are ever going to be super political, but I still haven't decided if I want to address certain issues more directly or just have it all kind of in the background or what. Last thing I want to do is preach to people. I've talked about this on the show before because honestly, it doesn't work and it's usually counterproductive. But maybe if I can, what I would like to do is show an example of a better way things could go, that things could work. And, maybe seeing that example will inspire people and think, hey, there are other ways to do things other than the selfish and greedy and self-destructive ways we've always done things. There are other ways. If we just, use our brains and our imaginations a little bit. So maybe seeing an example of that will encourage and inspire some people, which would be awesome. All right. Our next question comes also from actually, these all come from the Discord, so I don't need to keep saying that. From Eyes of a Bard, who asks, would there be any jobs in space that don't exist on Earth? Yeah, these are all hard questions. That's why they got saved for last. So when I first started thinking about this, I misread the question or I did it backwards. So Eyes of a Bard is asking about jobs that would be in space that don't exist on Earth. And I first started trying to think of jobs that would exist on Earth that would not exist in space. So I've actually answered both of those. All right. So starting off with things that you could do on Earth, but you couldn't do in space, that would not exist in space, common jobs that might not exist, for instance, on these cylinders. The first thing that came to mind is pretty much any job involving anything to do with animals is not going to exist on the cylinders because there aren't any animals. So any kind of, herdsman or herdsperson, dog groomers, pet sitters, pet trainers, all those kinds of things, those won't be jobs on the cylinders because there won't be any of those animals on the cylinders. The only animals that are going to be there are a few kinds of insects, like bees, honeybees, and maybe butterflies, I'm thinking now. I had a little discussion with some people in the Discord, And I either didn't realize or forgot that butterflies can be pollinators too, and they're obviously beautiful and relaxing to look at. So yeah, I think they'll be in the gardens. They'll be butterflies because why the hell not? They'll be pretty, and they can help pollinate. But yeah, no mammals or birds or anything like that. And if you're wondering why I did a whole episode called Animals in Space, and you can listen to my reasons why there won't be any. Also trying to think of jobs that will not exist in space in my setting on these cylinders. Any kind of job related to organized religion most likely will not exist on the cylinders. There really aren't going to be organized religions, at least not on the cylinders at this point. You know, some people will still have religious beliefs, of course, and people with similar beliefs will probably still gather to do whatever they do. But there won't be churches in the sense that we have them now that are treated and run as tax exempt businesses. Like that will no longer be a thing. And just, you know, most people are not going to be religious, and those that are, it will be a personal thing that, you know, they'll keep to themselves because it's personal. Just like you don't just talk about other personal things with people you barely know. So yeah, it'll be a private, personal thing. There won't be any religious organizations, nobody working in religion on the cylinders. However, to get to the question Eyes of the Bard actually asked, which is jobs in space that don't exist on Earth, so new jobs, basically. So there'll be some very specific construction type jobs in space that won't exist on Earth, because in space, construction will be done differently. So even this far in the future on Earth, you may still have human beings building houses and things like that. Maybe, maybe not. Probably at least in some places you will. In poor places, less developed places, you know, you'll still have humans building houses just like they have for forever. But in space, pretty much all construction is going to be done by robots, because you're going to be out in a vacuum. So it's much better to have a robot do it than a fragile human. And these robots will either be remote controlled by humans, or they will be robots that run on AI and can do their jobs autonomously. And it will be both. I mean, there will be some that are autonomous and some that are remote control, depending on the robot and what it's doing. And also, that's one of those things, you know, through time, AI is going to continue to develop and become more powerful and capable and able to do more and more things. So the further you go in the future, the more of these robots will be autonomous and just able to operate on their own and do what they're told. And less of them will be remote controlled by humans. Now, I do think as time goes on, these things like construction will be done robotically on Earth as well. For instance, building houses, bridges, things like that, as these technologies are developed and become cheaper and easier. However, some things will have to be redeveloped because on Earth, there's a lot more gravity than on space. So you can't necessarily use the same robot design that you use to build something on space to build something on Earth, because that robot was designed to work in microgravity. Any jobs to do with the space solar power satellites, other satellites, spaceships, things like that will most likely all be in space and not on Earth. And by spaceships, I mean ships built to only operate in space. Those will all be built in space. And in fact, they would not. They'd fall apart in a gravity well. Okay, a little aside here. I don't want to go too long today. But this brings up something that I've been thinking of a bit. As you know, doing all this research I've done for this, I learned when I was reading about these orbitals about how, you know, you build things very differently in space because there's little to no gravity. I mean, we call it microgravity. People say 0G. It's really not zero gravity. There is a tiny, tiny bit of gravity, but to us dumb humans, it seems like zero gravity. So I try to use the term microgravity because that's technically more correct. But, you know, if you're thinking what's the difference between microgravity and zero gravity? I mean, it's basically the same thing. When people say zero gravity, they really mean microgravity. But yeah, so when you build things on Earth, they have to be able to support their own weight because of gravity. But when you build things in space, they don't. So the way you would construct one of these huge cylinders in space, you don't need to build it to where it could support its own weight in an Earth gravity. So you build it differently. You can save a lot of weight and material, or I should say mass, I guess, and materials because you don't need certain types of structural strength like you would need on Earth because it doesn't need to support its own weight in a gravity well. So if you put one of these cylinders on Earth, they would fall apart. They would probably implode or crush because they are not built to support their own weight. So that was just one of the things that always really bothered me about Voyager, which, I mean, I don't want to tick anyone off, but is by far my least favorite Star Trek ever. Was just that, always they've always said since the original series that, the Enterprise is a starship. It's made to operate in space and it can't go onto a planet. It can't go into an atmosphere. It can't land on a planet. And in fact, the only time I ever remember seeing a starship land on a planet was a Klingon ship, a Klingon bird of prey. I don't remember if we first saw it on the planet in episode 4, the voyage home, or I think we actually saw it land on Vulcan at the end of episode 3, the search for Spock, Star Trek 3. But regardless, before that, I don't remember seeing any kind of spaceship in Star Trek land on the ground, and it was a Klingon ship, and they're presented as much more rugged and sturdy and things like that. And it was like, sure, fine. But then all of a sudden in Voyager, we have a starship that can land on a planet and fly within an atmosphere, and no appreciable visible difference in the design that suddenly this ship can withstand being in a gravity well when the others couldn't. And honestly, between me and you, I just don't think the people that came up with that really understood how these things work and didn't understand that the reason the Enterprise couldn't land on a planet wasn't just that it didn't have landing gear. It was because it wasn't built to support its own weight and wasn't built to withstand entering an atmosphere and all these things. And there's nothing about, the ship Voyager that makes it look like suddenly it would be able to withstand all of these forces that none of the other ships before could. It doesn't seem to be made of a different material or anything like that. So yeah, which I think they only actually landed the ship once or twice on the show, but it always really bothered me. And at the time I just thought it was dumb, but I couldn't really say why, other than it just seemed really stupid. But now, after learning more about this stuff, now I understand why it seems stupid, is because, well, these ships can't support their own weight. And then honestly, I feel like it was even worse in Enterprise, which I did like, because they had that ship flying in Earth's gravity well in the atmosphere. And that was like the first, ship like that ever built. So it's like, yeah, that one could do it, but Kirk's Enterprise couldn't. Yeah, it didn't make any sense. But yeah, that's some of the problems you run into when I guess you don't have people checking things to make sure that they actually work. I mean, yeah, it's space opera and you can take artistic license, but I don't know. I think that only takes you so far. And then you start to lose the suspension of disbelief. Anyway, enough of that tangent. So rockets will probably still be used occasionally to get things into orbit for whatever reason if they don't want to use a space elevator. So those would still be built on Earth. And there's a lot of other things that are done on Earth now that won't be done on Earth anymore, that will be done in space instead. Specifically things needing resources that are more abundant in space, as well as things that have negative environmental impact on Earth. For example, a lot of the mining will be done in space, mining for metals and rare earth elements and stuff like that. Not only are those things very abundant in space, and you can find those on asteroids and whatnot, But you can mine those things on an asteroid where you don't have to worry about environmental impact. You don't have to worry about poisoning water or poisoning the air or anything like that. So as soon as that becomes a viable option, you're going to see a lot less of that stuff happening on Earth, because it's going to be a lot harder to justify ruining our only planet when you could go do it on an asteroid that no one cares about, and you can do whatever you want to that asteroid. Nobody cares. So you're going to see a lot more of that kind of stuff happening in space, even if it means that they then need to bring stuff down to Earth. Because again, we have space elevators, so that won't really be that difficult or expensive to do. And the savings to the damage to Earth itself will be more than worth it. I think ultimately a lot of, maybe even all of the farming will be done in space in agricultural cylinders. So cylinders built just for agriculture, specifically farming that has negative environmental impact, like growing loads and loads of cereal grains and, like what we do in the US. And I think most developed nations now, where you're just growing one crop over acres and acres and acres and acres. That kind of thing is really not good for the environment in a lot of ways. So again, to reduce damaging Earth, those things will be done in space. And actually you can create a much more controlled environment in one of these orbitals to grow your corn or your wheat or your barley or your rice or whatever you want to grow than you could ever have on Earth, because you can control every facet of the environment, the temperature, the humidity, the gravity, everything is under your control in a way that it's not if you're growing on a field on the surface of Earth. You can control the weather effectively. So a lot more of that kind of stuff is going to be done in space. And as the technology develops and people become even more and more sensitive to taking care of Earth and eliminating any kind of damage to it, more and more things will be done in space simply to preserve Earth's environment, even if it means it, quote, costs more to do it in space, because you then have to bring whatever it is back to the people of Earth. But like I said, with the space elevators and ubiquitous electricity, even if it does, quote, cost more, it won't be a lot more, and it will be more than worth it for the elimination of environmental impact on Earth. All right, so I am not claiming to say I'm answering these questions well, but I am answering them to the best of my ability right now. Our next question comes from C-Sand, who asks, how do you think the education system might change between now and when the cylinders are fully realized, besides free education, which you've already mentioned? So yeah, well, I'll start with that. Free education is a big one. And by that, I mean all the way. No one will pay for education. The only way you would have to pay for education would be is if you did really badly. So maybe you went to college and you just partied all the time and you flunked out of everything. At that point, you'd probably have to pay for a semester or however long until you demonstrated that you're going to, pass your classes, because the government's not going to foot the bill for you to just party and flunk all your classes. But as long as you do well, as long as you pass your classes, C average or whatever or better, your education will be paid as far as you want to go. If you want to get a PhD, you'll be able to, and you won't have to pay for any of it. Because, people will finally realize that it's better to have more educated people, and that's an investment in the future. So why wouldn't society pay for that when it's going to benefit from it? So yeah, education will be free as high as you want to go. I haven't really thought a lot about specific changes as far as how education will be different, but I tried to think about it a little bit to answer this question. So here's what I've got for you right now. Kind of the new high school diploma will be a 2-year degree, a 2-year college degree, so kind of technical degree. So kind of now, you can get by without a high school diploma. There are jobs you can get without one. There definitely are. They're very usually low paying jobs, and not jobs that most people would want, but they're out there. So kind of the same thing. You won't have to get a 2-year degree, but to get any kind of job that anybody's going to want at this day and time, you'll want at least a 2-year degree. Most people are going to get at least a 4-year degree, because why wouldn't they? So yeah, especially definitely up in the cylinders, a 2-year degree will be seen as like the minimum to be viable. And really up there, it'll probably be more like everybody's going to have at least a 4-year degree, probably more. Also, hopefully by then the education system has transitioned to teaching people how to think instead of teaching them what to think, which is mainly what we do now, at least here in the United States. It's a lot of memorization and just learning, quote, facts. Of course, a lot of them are bullshit. They're not actually facts, but it's propaganda. But yeah, you're taught what to think. And that's, unfortunately, religion does the same thing, even more so. You're taught this is what you think, this is what you believe, as opposed to teaching you how to think for yourself, how to think critically for yourself. At least here in the US, you don't learn that till college, which is why it's sad that more people don't go to college. And you can really tell the people who haven't gone to college, because a lot of times they don't have those critical thinking skills. They just believe what they hear or what they're told. So I think by this point, this will have happened. People will finally realize that, no, I don't want to brainwash my kids to just believe and think what I think. I want them to actually be able to think for themselves and to question what they're taught. And so, yeah, I think education will be a lot better, a lot more effective than it is now, at least here in the US. I can't speak to education in other countries. And yeah, critical thinking skills will be highly regarded. And because of that, there'll be a lot less people subscribing to superstition, magical thinking, religion, things like that, especially again, up in space. Because the more you value critical thinking, the more those things kind of go away, which is why a lot of people don't want to teach children critical thinking, because they don't want those things to go away. Also, hopefully, just kind of a pet peeve of mine, hopefully, at least in the United States, we'll actually be teaching real U.S. history, what actually happened, instead of the propaganda that's taught in pre-college level schools now. Let's hope. Teachers and professors will be more valued in society and better paid than they are now, especially in space again. But I think this will be true in most areas on Earth as well. I think by this point, education will probably begin at earlier ages than it does now. Again, at least in the US. I don't know about other countries. Children actually have an amazing capacity to learn that we don't really tap into right now here in the US. By the time we start really trying to teach kids, their brains aren't as plastic as they used to be. We kind of missed that golden window we had where they could just absorb so much and learn so much so easily, especially in languages. For instance, before I think it's age 5, kids can learn languages much more easily than they can after that age, and almost without effort. Just by being exposed to it, they'll learn it. So at the very least in space, children will be taught numerous languages from the very beginning. So if they're, and these cylinders are multinational places. They have dozens of countries that contribute to them. So there are probably dozens of languages that are spoke on them. So it's going to be kind of required, not kind of, it's going to be required for everyone on board to be able to speak numerous languages, which of course will be hardest on the first generations, people that go there. It'll be easier once people are born there and they grow up with that. But the first few generations, it will be the hardest because you'll have adults having to suddenly learn all these new languages. And that's when it's hardest, is when you're an adult. But, if the parents of the kid don't speak all the languages that they want the kid to know, then they can have nannies and caretakers that do speak those languages, so the kid can be exposed to them every day. And then the kids can just learn those languages organically, not necessarily taught them, just exposed to them on a daily basis, and they'll learn them. And yeah, there's going to be lots of languages being spoken. Everyone's going to know multiple languages. And people who are born and raised on the cylinders will know a number of languages by the time they're 6 years old or so. So yeah, those are some ways I see education changing. Just more and better education, I guess, is what it boils down to. I'm not planning on any any huge disruptions to the status quo. I mean, as far as, you'll still have schools and things like that, as far as I know. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking for that. And that is it. I have finally addressed, to the best that I can right now anyway, all of the questions that you all sent me for the setting. Seems like a great way to wrap up season 1 on world building. So just again, a quick note about the show going forward. I'm shifting my focus away from world building. I mean, I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, which is basically talking about what's on my mind, what I'm doing right now. If I gain any insights or learn anything, I will share it with you. And yeah, I'm still a little on the fence for season 2. I'm actually thinking I might not. I was thinking originally that for season 2, I would try to focus on characters and conflicts or plot. But looking at how season 1 went, even now, looking at the episodes I've done so far, they're not all about world building. So I feel like it's a little bit of a misnomer to say, oh, this is world building for science fiction, because I did talk about other things, and I don't want to do that again. Also, I'm honestly not sure how much, if at all, it's going to mess things up when I change the subtitle for the show as far as the various podcast directories, if it'll have any impact. I don't think it will, but just, I've learned with this stuff, just because I think something shouldn't matter or have an impact doesn't mean it won't. So, yeah, I'm thinking about going with a more generic subtitle going forward. I'm thinking it might just be writing science fiction, and then I can feel more free to just do whatever I want. And I think that'll probably better fit what I end up doing anyway, because I'm not going to spend. I mean, really, the more I think about it, I'm not really focusing on characters and plot like I did on the world building. It's more, I'm kind of doing it all at once now. I did in the beginning, I was very focused on the world building for a while, but now there isn't so much a focus on a specific thing, which is interesting because, if you go back to the very first episodes, I thought I was going to spend a bunch of time working on world building, and I was going to spend time coming up with my characters, and then I was going to spend time figuring out what the plot would be, and then I would start writing. And that's just not the way it's happening. Once I had the world building done, like I wanted to start writing, and I wanted to, it just makes most sense to just kind of do it all at once, because it's all interrelated, right? So now that I've got the basics of a setting, like I have some ideas for plots and conflicts, and I have some ideas for characters. And anytime, I flesh one out, it affects the other. So the more I flesh out my character, the more it informs, the plot. The more I think about the plot, the more it informs the character. So at this point, it's really hard to kind of separate things out. And I feel like if I tried to do that, that would be very artificial. Like that's really not what I'm doing. So I don't see how that would be a benefit to anyone for me to try to artificially separate things in a way that I'm really not doing. Because the whole point of this is to kind of try to show what I'm doing and how I'm doing it in the hopes that it'll help you, get going. Not to say that what I'm doing is going to necessarily work for you, but it at least gives you something to think about and decide, okay, this is what Lex did. Does that sound good to me? Does that sound like that would work for me or not? Because that's been my experience. When I hear another writer give advice, I almost always have some kind of a reaction to it. I either think, oh, wow, that sounds really smart. That makes a lot of sense to me. That sounds like that could really work. I want to try that. Or my reaction might be, I don't know about that. That doesn't really make sense to me. Or I don't think that would work for me. Or that seems kind of backwards. Or that just doesn't make sense to me. Or it seems more difficult than the way I would do it. So yeah, that's been my experience. It's rare that I hear some kind of, I don't honestly know that I've ever heard a piece of writing advice and not had some kind of opinion about it and just been completely like, well, I don't know if that would work or not. It seems like I always either have a feeling that would work for me or it wouldn't. And, of course, a lot of times I try it to see, but, if everyone is like that in that way, then, that can be helpful to you too, even if what I'm doing won't work for you, just by realizing that what I'm doing won't work for you might help you figure out what will work for you. Right. I don't know. That's how it works for me. So that is the way in which I hope that this will be helpful to you. Not that I expect anyone out there to just do what I'm doing and have that work for them. Because I suspect we're all different enough that no one out there is going to be able to do it exactly the way I do it and be happy with that. Like everyone's going to put their own spin on it, at least, if they don't end up doing something totally different. But yeah, my hope is that at the very least, hearing me talk about how I do it will help you better decide how you want to do it, even if it's just in opposition to what I do, even if what I'm saying just sounds so wrong that it helps you realize the thing that you want to do, which is kind of the opposite of what I'm doing. So maybe, I'm trying to discovery right now, and that just doesn't sound right to you, and that just sounds silly, and you got to have an outline, or maybe I'm too far on the outlining side for you, and you're like, man, Lex is thinking way too much about this stuff. He should just sit down and write something. So those kinds of reactions are good because that helps you get at what works for you. And you won't really know until you try it, because sometimes, I think something will work for me and I'll try it and it doesn't, or it doesn't work like I thought it would. But yeah, so hopefully it's helpful to you in that way. All right, so that is it for episode, what is this, 25, and for season 1. If you'd like to reach me, you can email me at lexoutloudpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at LexStarWalker, and you can call my voicemail 951-465-5391. That's 951-465-5391. I have a Discord server you can join, hang out with us there. And yeah, I really hope you do. We have a lot of fun in there. Also, if you'd like to support the show, I have a support page on my website where you can find all the different ways you can support the show. I've got a Patreon. I've got an Amazon referral link. You can leave a review. There's all kinds of things you can do. So if you want to help out, check out that page. That's at lexstarwalker.com/support. And you can find the show notes for this and all the episodes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for me for season 1 of Lex Out Loud. I'll be back soon with episode 26 and season 2. I'm not sure at this point. There might be a week or 2 hiatus before I come back with season 2. I'm trying to get some. My wife is going to make me some new album art, I think. So we'll see how long that takes. And also, I just might need some time to just plan the next few episodes. So I might take a week or 2 off before we come back for episode 26, or I might be back next week. I'm not sure at this point. But either way, it won't be long. It won't be more than a few weeks. So yeah, we'll be back soon. And until then, hang out with us in the Discord and keep writing. We'll see you soon.